In the shadow-filled streets of 1972nd, Chicago, where loyalty was measured in blood and beauty in diamonds, Olivia Donatelli learned the cruelest lesson of the Mafia world, that a woman's worth was often judged by her appearance. Daughter of underboss Lorenzo Donatelli, Olivia was arranged to marry into power, until Gabriel Falcone took one look at her and declared her too plain for a man of his stature. Humiliated before the entire Chicago outfit, she was cast aside like yesterday's newspaper. Abandoned by her own family and forced to survive on the fringes of a world that had always been her birthright, Olivia would soon face an even greater danger. When Daniel Russo, lieutenant of their Detroit rivals, noticed her quietly observing a meeting from the shadows, what happened next would shake the foundations of both crime families and challenge everything they believed about loyalty, power, and love. Because sometimes, the most dangerous weapon isn't a gun or a knife. It's seeing the truth in someone when everyone else has looked away. This is the shocking true story of a Mafia princess who discovered that real power isn't found in beauty or bloodlines, but in the eyes of someone brave enough to see beyond both. In the winter of 1975, when Chicago's skyline disappeared into gray skies and the wind carried whispers of secrets and promises across Lake Michigan, there came an envelope in Olivia Donatelli's steady hands. An envelope bearing the Falcone family crest, containing an invitation that would determine her future in a world built on blood ties and fierce loyalty. The streets of Little Sicily were quiet that evening, snow falling softly between the old world buildings, muffling the sounds of life behind drawn curtains. It was a neighborhood of tradition, of unwritten rules, of family businesses that served as fronts for the real commerce happening in back rooms. Here, even the street lamps seemed to shine with an understanding of which shadows to illuminate and which to leave undisturbed. Olivia stood at her bedroom window, breath fogging the glass as her dark eyes watched fat snowflakes disappear into the darkness. The invitation sat on her vanity, its heavy cream paper promising a destiny she had been prepared for since childhood. 23 years of training to be the perfect Mafia wife, educated enough to manage household accounts, reserved enough to keep family secrets, and invisible enough to never draw attention from the wrong people. "You've read it 12 times, came her father's voice from the doorway. Lorenzo Donatelli wasn't a large man, but he carried himself with the unmistakable authority of someone who had survived decades in a business where most men didn't see their 50th birthday. His hair was still dark, though silver threaded at his temples, and his eyes, so much like Olivia's own, missed nothing. "I want to make sure I understand what's expected," Olivia replied, turning from the window. Her voice was soft but never weak, a quality her late mother had cultivated in her. "The Falcones aren't known for their forgiveness of social missteps." Lorenzo crossed the room, his limp barely perceptible, a souvenir from a territorial dispute in '62 that no one discussed. He picked up the invitation, the heavy gold ring on his right hand catching the lamplight. "It's a formality. Frank Bianchi has already approved the match. Gabriel Falcone will be impressed, or he'll pretend to be. Either way, by summer you'll be a Falcone." Olivia nodded once, her face a careful mask that revealed nothing of the storm beneath. She had known this day would come. In their world, daughters were assets, bargaining chips, bridges between powerful families. She had watched her cousins married off one by one, had seen which matches strengthened alliances and which ones merely delayed inevitable conflicts. "Do you know him well?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Gabriel Falcone was 5 years her senior, the only son of Capo Anthony Falcone, educated at private schools back east, before returning to take his place in the family business. Their paths had crossed at holidays and funerals, but never with any meaningful exchange. Lorenzo's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I know enough. He's smart, ambitious. He'll be made capo when his father retires. The Falcones have held the North Side for 3 generations. Your children will inherit that power." Children. Olivia's hand smoothed down her simple dark dress, wondering if her future husband would find her suitable for bearing his heirs. She wasn't beautiful in the way that turned heads when she entered rooms. Her features were too strong, her gaze too direct, her figure too straight and boyish compared to the curvy showgirls who hung from the arms of made men at social clubs. "Your mother would be proud," Lorenzo said, misreading her silence. "She always said you were born to rise higher than we had." Elena Donatelli had died 5 years earlier, cancer stealing her quickly before she could see her only daughter reach womanhood. Sometimes Olivia wondered if her mother would truly recognize the woman she had become, studious rather than social, more comfortable with books than people, her natural reserve deepening into something approaching isolation after her mother's death. "I'll make you proud, Papa," Olivia said, the words practiced and perfect, like so many aspects of her carefully constructed life. Lorenzo touched her cheek briefly, a rare gesture of affection. "You already do live. Now get some sleep. Isabella Bianchi is sending her personal shopper tomorrow. We need to make sure you outshine every other woman at that engagement party." After her father left, Olivia returned to the window. Below, his driver was already waiting, car engine running, exhaust creating ghosts in the cold air. Thursday night meant collection rounds in the neighborhood, a reminder that even family occasions didn't pause business. She pressed her palm against the cold glass, wondering what Gabriel Falcone would see when he looked at her. Would he notice that she spoke 3 languages? That she could recall every detail of a conversation weeks later? That she had been keeping her father's book since she was 17, uncovering a scheme by one of his lieutenants to skim profits? Or would he just see what most men saw, a woman too serious, too plain, too much her father's daughter to be truly desirable? It didn't matter, she told herself firmly. This wasn't about desire. It was about duty, about family, about maintaining the delicate balance of power that kept them all safe in a dangerous world. Her feelings were irrelevant in the face of such considerations. Olivia Donatelli turned from the window and carefully placed the invitation in her desk drawer. Then she began to prepare herself for the role she had been born to play, the perfect Mafia wife, whose worth would be measured not by her face or figure, but by her loyalty, discretion, and the sons she would bear. In a world where beauty faded and passion cooled, these were the qualities that ensured survival. She didn't know then how wrong she was, or how quickly the carefully arranged pieces of her life would shatter. She couldn't have imagined that in less than a month, she would be cast out by the very family that had raised her, or that her salvation would come from the most dangerous source possible, a man whose name was spoken only in whispers by her father's associates, a man whose family had sworn to destroy everything the Donatellis had built. Olivia Donatelli wasn't born with a silver spoon in her mouth. It was solid gold, engraved with the family crest, and came with the silent understanding that it could be snatched away at any moment. As the only child of Lorenzo Donatelli, she had grown up in the contradictory embrace of extreme privilege and constant vigilance. By her 23rd birthday, Olivia had perfected the art of being present yet invisible. At family gatherings in the back rooms of Donatelli-owned restaurants, she moved like a ghost between tables of made men, absorbing conversations about territory and tribute without appearing to listen. She delivered espresso with steady hands while memorizing names, dates, and dollar amounts that might later prove useful to her father. Lorenzo had taught her early. Information was currency in their world, sometimes more valuable than the cash counted nightly in their basement. "You see too much," her Aunt Cecilia had once complained, uncomfortable under Olivia's steady gaze. Men don't like women who watch so closely. Perhaps that explained why Olivia had never attracted suitors despite her family's prominence. Or perhaps it was her appearance. Not unattractive, but unremarkable in a world where Mafia daughters were expected to be spectacular. Her dark hair fell straight to her shoulders, uncooperative with the elaborate styles favored by other family women. Her face was olive-skinned and angular, with a strong jaw inherited from her father and eyes that people found disconcerting. Too perceptive, too unwavering, too difficult to lie to. In another life, Olivia might have become a lawyer or professor. She had graduated top of her class at the private Catholic school, where Donatelli money ensured both excellent education and discreet silence about family business. Her mind was precise and analytical, finding patterns in chaos and solutions where others saw only problems. Lorenzo had recognized her intelligence early, teaching her the family's legitimate businesses, the restaurants, the waste management company, the construction firm, while other girls learned to dance and flirt. After her mother's death, Olivia had stepped naturally into the role of managing the household, overseeing the staff with quiet efficiency. The family home on the edge of Little Sicily was always immaculate. Meals served precisely on time, household accounts balanced to the penny. If the maids whispered that Miss Donatelli was cold, that she rarely smiled or joined the neighborhood women for coffee after church, Olivia pretended not to notice. She found her pleasures in small, private moments. Early mornings in the kitchen garden her mother had planted, where she grew herbs and tomatoes in the summer. Afternoons in her father's library, losing herself in histories and classics that transported her beyond Chicago's borders. Evening walks with only Angelo, her father's most trusted bodyguard, shadowing her steps from a respectful distance. What no one knew, not her father, not the family associates, not even the household staff, was that Olivia kept a secret account at a bank downtown, funded by small, untraceable amounts skimmed from her household budget over years. It wasn't that she planned to escape. Loyalty to her father was bone deep and unquestioned. But Olivia Donatelli had watched too many Mafia wives left destitute when husbands went to prison or ended up in Lake Michigan wearing concrete shoes. She had vowed never to be powerless, no matter what her future held. That future now had a name: Gabriel Falcone, heir to the North Side operation, a man known for his expensive suits and expensive tastes. Olivia had seen him at the funeral of old Don Calabrese last year, tall and conventionally handsome, with carefully styled hair and a smile that appeared and disappeared with calculated precision. He had been surrounded by a rotating circle of glamorous women, none of whom he introduced to the family elders. Olivia had observed him from across the reception, noting how his charm intensified proportionally to the importance of whoever he was addressing. The match made strategic sense. The Donatelli and Falcone families had maintained an uneasy alliance for years, their territories adjacent but distinct. Her father's position as underboss to Frank the Hammer Bianchi meant the Donatellis had power but not ultimate authority. A marriage linking their families would strengthen Lorenzo's position, while giving the Falcones access to the Donatelli network of political connections, judges, aldermen, and police captains who owed Lorenzo favors stretching back decades. What remained unclear was what Gabriel himself thought of the arrangement. Had he agreed readily or been pressured? Did he know Olivia beyond her name and lineage? Did he care? On the morning after receiving the invitation, Olivia stood before her closet, considering these questions as she prepared for Isabella Bianchi's personal shopper. Her wardrobe was quality but conservative: tailored wool skirts, silk blouses in muted colors, cashmere sweaters that whispered money rather than shouted it. Nothing like the flashy styles favored by women who decorated the arms of made men. "These won't do at all," she murmured to herself, running a hand along the garments. For the first time in years, Olivia felt a flutter of anxiety in her chest. She knew how to manage household staff, how to maintain ledgers that would withstand IRS scrutiny, how to smile politely through interminable family dinners, but she had no idea how to become the kind of woman who would impress Gabriel Falcone, or if such a transformation was even possible. The Bianchi estate sprawled across 3 manicured acres in the most exclusive section of Lake Forest, its limestone facade and sweeping drive designed to impress even the wealthiest of Chicago society. On this crisp Saturday evening, a line of gleaming Cadillacs and Lincolns snaked up to the entrance, disgorging passengers who represented the upper echelon of both legitimate business and La Familia. Olivia sat beside her father in the back of his midnight blue Continental, her hands folded tightly in her lap to hide their slight tremor. The engagement announcement party, orchestrated by Isabella Bianchi herself, would make the arrangement with Gabriel official before the entire organization. There would be no turning back after tonight. "You look beautiful," Lorenzo said, a rare compliment that made Olivia glance up in surprise. She had spent the afternoon at the city's most exclusive salon, where her straight dark hair had been transformed into soft waves that framed her face. The dress, selected by Isabella's shopper, was emerald silk that draped elegantly over her slender frame, more sophisticated than anything Olivia would have chosen for herself. Diamond earrings that had belonged to her mother completed the transformation. "Thank you, Papa," she replied, touching the earrings gently. "I hope I'll make the right impression." Lorenzo's expression softened momentarily. "This match is good for our family, Liv. The Falcones need our connections, and we need their territory. Gabriel is getting a woman who understands our world, who can be trusted. That's rare and valuable." The car stopped at the entrance, where 2 men in dark suits, security disguised as valets, opened their doors. Lorenzo exited first, then extended his hand to help Olivia. As they approached the grand double doors, he leaned close to her ear. "Remember who you are," he murmured. "You're a Donatelli. You belong here." Olivia straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin, schooling her features into the composed expression expected of a Donna. The mask settled over her like a second skin as they entered the glittering foyer. Inside, the Bianchi home was a monument to conspicuous consumption. Crystal chandeliers hung from coffered ceilings, while Renaissance paintings, some whispered to be acquired through less than legitimate channels, adorned walls covered in silk damask. Waiters circulated with champagne and canapes, navigating expertly between clusters of guests engaged in careful conversation. Isabella Bianchi spotted them immediately, breaking away from a group to glide toward them. In her early 50s, but preserved through rigorous maintenance, Isabella wore her platinum hair swept into a chignon that showcased diamond earrings that could have paid for a small house. Her smile was practiced perfection as she air-kissed Olivia's cheeks. "Lorenzo, darling," she greeted, her voice carrying just the right note of warmth. "And Olivia, how lovely you look tonight. The dress suits you beautifully. Come, Gabriel has been asking when you would arrive." This was a lie. Olivia could tell from the slight tightening around Isabella's eyes, but she smiled and followed the woman through the crowd. Lorenzo was immediately drawn into conversation with a group of capos, leaving Olivia to face her future alone. Gabriel Falcone stood near the grand fireplace, the center of a circle of admirers. At 28, he had the confident posture of a man accustomed to respect. His tailored tuxedo accentuated broad shoulders, while his dark hair was styled with just enough product to look effortless. When he laughed at something, one of his companions said, the sound was calibrated to be heard without appearing to seek attention. As Isabella led Olivia toward him, she felt a curious sensation of destiny settling over her. This was the moment her life would change, when she would transition from daughter to fiancé, from Donatelli to Falcone. She had prepared for this. She was ready. "Gabriel," Isabella said, touching his arm to gain his attention. "Look who's finally here, Olivia Donatelli." Gabriel turned, his eyes sweeping over Olivia in a swift assessment. For a fraction of a second, something flickered across his features, something Olivia couldn't quite name but recognized instinctively as disappointment. It vanished immediately, replaced by a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Donatelli," he said, taking her hand and bringing it to his lips in a gesture that should have been gallant but felt perfunctory. "I've been looking forward to meeting you properly." Another lie. Olivia could read it in the careful distance he maintained, in the way his gaze already drifted past her to scan the room even as he spoke. But she smiled back, playing her part flawlessly. "Mr. Falcone, the pleasure is mine." For the next hour, Gabriel kept Olivia at his side as protocol demanded, introducing her to associates and accepting congratulations. His hand rested lightly at the small of her back, guiding her through the crowd, but she felt the tension in his touch, as if he were fulfilling an obligation rather than embracing a future. She spoke when appropriate, laughed at the right moments, and observed everything: the subtle hierarchies, the alliances, the resentments simmering beneath polite smiles. No one would have guessed from her composed exterior that with each passing minute, a cold certainty was growing within her. Gabriel Falcone was not merely indifferent to their match. He was actively displeased by it. The question was why, and what it would mean for her future in a world where rejection could be far more dangerous than a simple broken heart. The week following the engagement party passed in a blur of social obligations and wedding preparations. Olivia found herself swept into a whirlwind orchestrated primarily by Isabella Bianchi, who seemed determined to transform the Donatelli-Falcone union into the social event of the season. There were appointments with caterers, florists, and dressmakers, each selected from Isabella's exclusive circle and each more expensive than the last. Through it all, Gabriel remained a distant figure. He appeared for the necessary public engagements, a dinner with both families at the exclusive Milano Club, a meeting with Father Malone about the ceremony, but always managed to have pressing business immediately after. Their conversations remained polite, superficial, and brief. On a blustery Thursday afternoon, Olivia sat in the back room of Bella Vista, her father's flagship restaurant in Little Sicily, reviewing the books as she did each month. The familiar rhythm of numbers brought her comfort amid the uncertainty of her engagement. Here, at least, was order and clarity. The door opened without a knock. Only her father would enter this way. And Lorenzo appeared, his expression unreadable. "You have a visitor," he said, voice carefully neutral. "Gabriel is here. He says he needs to speak with you privately." Olivia's pencil paused mid-calculation. "Here? Now?" Lorenzo nodded once. "I'll send him in. I'll be in my office if you need me." The slight emphasis on the last words carried a clear message. If Gabriel stepped out of line, help was close at hand. She quickly closed the ledger and smoothed her hair, heart suddenly racing. This unexpected visit could only mean news, and in her experience, unexpected news rarely brought joy. When Gabriel entered, he seemed different from the polished figure who had stood beside her at social functions. His shoulders carried tension, and his usual confident stride had a hesitancy to it. He declined her offer to sit, remaining standing near the door as if planning a quick escape. "Olivia," he began, then stopped, adjusting his gold cufflinks, a nervous gesture she hadn't seen from him before. "I've come to discuss our arrangement." The careful choice of words, arrangement rather than engagement, sent a chill through her. "Of course," she replied, keeping her voice steady. "What aspect did you wish to discuss?" Gabriel paced a few steps, avoiding her eyes. "My father and yours have certain expectations about this union. Business expectations that make sense for both families." "Yes," Olivia agreed carefully. "The alliance is strategically sound." "The alliance, yes." Gabriel finally looked at her directly. "But the marriage itself, I've been giving it considerable thought." Olivia folded her hands in her lap, a calm exterior masking the sudden acceleration of her pulse. "And what have you concluded?" The bluntness of her question seemed to throw him momentarily. Gabriel was accustomed to people who danced around difficult topics, not someone who faced them head-on. "You're an intelligent woman, Olivia. You understand the world we live in. In our position, certain appearances must be maintained." He paused, choosing his words. "A man in my situation needs a particular kind of wife, someone who makes an immediate impression, who commands attention when she enters a room." Each word landed like a small, precise cut. Olivia remained perfectly still, her expression unchanged, though something inside her began to crumble. "I need someone more." Gabriel hesitated, then finished with brutal directness. "Someone less plain. Someone who reflects the image I need to project as I rise in the organization." There it was. The truth she had sensed from their first meeting, now laid bare between them. Not anger, not cruelty, but something almost worse. Cold assessment, and found wanting. "I see," she said, her voice so controlled it surprised even her. "And you've discussed this with your father?" Gabriel shifted uncomfortably. "Not yet. I wanted to speak with you first, out of respect." Respect. The word almost made her laugh. But Olivia Donatelli had not survived in this world by revealing her emotions easily. "What do you propose, then?" she asked. "Our families have announced the engagement. Invitations have been ordered. There are expectations." Gabriel's relief at her businesslike approach was visible. "I have a solution that preserves the alliance while allowing us both to avoid an unsuitable match." He outlined his plan. A gradual cooling of relations, a manufactured disagreement that could be blamed for breaking the engagement. The families would maintain their business arrangement through a different mechanism, perhaps a shared venture in the expanding Las Vegas operations. As he spoke, Olivia watched him with those eyes that had always made people uncomfortable. Too direct, too seeing. She realized he had rehearsed this speech, had calculated each word for maximum effect and minimum fallout. What he hadn't anticipated was her dignity, her refusal to plead or create a scene. When he finished, silence filled the room. Gabriel waited for her response, clearly expecting tears or anger or negotiation. Instead, Olivia stood, straightened the papers on the desk, and looked at him with a gaze so clear and steady it made him step back involuntarily. "You've made your position clear, Mr. Falcone. I won't keep you any longer." She moved toward the door, opening it in a clear dismissal. "I'm sure our fathers will have much to discuss." Gabriel hesitated, thrown by her composure. "Olivia, I hope you understand this isn't personal." "On the contrary," she interrupted, her voice soft but carrying an edge he'd never heard before. "Rejecting someone for being too plain is entirely personal. But you've done me a service today. You've shown me exactly who you are before I made the mistake of becoming your wife." For a moment, something like regret flickered across his face. Then his mask of confidence returned, and with a curt nod, he left. Olivia closed the door behind him, leaned against it, and finally allowed herself a single, shuddering breath. The only acknowledgement she would give to the humiliation burning through her veins. The aftermath of Gabriel's rejection unfolded with the explosive force of a carefully planted bomb. Olivia had barely composed herself when her father burst into the back office, his face a thundercloud of rage. Lorenzo Donatelli, always so controlled, so measured in his responses, slammed his fist against the mahogany desk with such force that the ledgers jumped. He said, "What?" Lorenzo's voice was dangerously quiet, the calm before a violent storm. "He called my daughter too plain?" Olivia stood perfectly still, her back straight, refusing to let her shoulders curve with the shame burning through her. "Papa, please, the exact words don't matter. The outcome is the same." "The exact words matter very much," Lorenzo replied, his accent thickening with anger as it always did in moments of extreme emotion. The Falcones agreed to this match. Papers were signed. Hands were shaken. And now, this preening peacock dares to insult my blood. He reached for the telephone on the desk, and Olivia moved quickly to intercept him. "What are you doing?" "Calling Frank Bianchi. This insult cannot stand. Gabriel's father will." "No." Olivia placed her hand over his on the receiver. "Please, Papa, don't make this worse than it already is. I don't want to marry a man who doesn't want me." Lorenzo stared at her, conflict evident in his dark eyes. "This isn't about want, Olivia. This is business. This is respect. And what respect would I have as his wife? What position would that put me in?" She kept her voice steady through sheer force of will. "The alliance can be maintained in other ways. Gabriel mentioned Las Vegas." "Gabriel mentioned?" Lorenzo's voice rose. "You sit there calmly discussing business alternatives while he humiliates our family? While he rejects you as if you were damaged goods to be returned?" The words stung more than Olivia wanted to admit. She turned away, moving to the small window that overlooked the restaurant's courtyard. Below, life continued normally. Staff bringing in deliveries, a cook stepping outside for a cigarette break. How strange that her world could shatter, while everything around her remained unchanged. "I need you to let me handle this my way," she said finally. "No vendettas, no retribution. At least not yet." Lorenzo was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried a new note. Something like respect mixed with concern. "You've always been like your mother. Steady, thinking 3 moves ahead. But Liv, in our world, perception is reality. If word spreads that the Falconese deemed you unworthy, then we control the narrative." Olivia turned back to face him. "We say I was the one who had doubts. That I discovered something about Gabriel that made me reconsider. What reason could be believable? Everyone has seen how the women flock to him." Olivia smiled thinly. "Perhaps I discovered his interest in other men, or gambling debts hidden from his family, or a secret drug habit that would embarrass the Falcones if exposed." Lorenzo's eyebrows rose slightly. "You would spread such rumors? I wouldn't have to spread them. Just hint to Isabella Bianchi that there are concerns I'm too discreet to discuss openly. She'll do the rest." Olivia shrugged, a calculated gesture of indifference. "Unless you'd prefer the truth to be known, that your daughter was deemed too physically inadequate to join the Falcone family." The calculation worked. Lorenzo's protective instincts warred with his strategic mind, and finally, he nodded. "We do it your way. For now. But understand this, the Falcones will pay for this insult, one way or another. No one humiliates our family without consequences." 3 days later, Olivia stood in the kitchen of the family home, preparing for what would likely be the most difficult social appearance of her life. The annual benefit for Street. Anthony's Hospital, hosted by none other than Isabella Bianchi, was the premier social event in their circles, and attendance was mandatory for families of their standing. It would be her first public appearance since the broken engagement. Though no formal announcement had been made, whispers had spread through the organization like wildfire. Carefully planted rumors about Gabriel's private indiscretions had taken root, giving Olivia cover for ending the arrangement. But the truth lurked beneath, a truth that everyone involved understood implicitly. She had been judged and found wanting. Maria, the Donatelli's longtime housekeeper, entered the kitchen with an envelope. "This came for you, Miss Olivia?" Hand-delivered. Olivia recognized the expensive stationery immediately. Isabella Bianchi's personal letterhead, with its embossed gold crest. Her stomach tightened as she broke the seal and unfolded the note inside. "My dear Olivia, in light of recent developments, I believe it would be best for all concerned if you reconsidered your attendance at tonight's benefit. While I understand your desire to maintain appearances, your presence would create an awkward situation for the Falcone family. I'm sure you agree that the charitable purpose of the evening should not be overshadowed by personal matters. With sincere regard, Isabella." The elegant handwriting couldn't disguise the brutal message. "You are no longer welcome. You have been cast out." Olivia read it twice, then carefully folded it and placed it back in its envelope. Maria watched her anxiously, having served the family long enough to sense trouble. "Bad news, miss?" "A clarification, that's all." Olivia's voice betrayed nothing of the humiliation burning through her veins. "It seems my calendar has unexpectedly cleared for this evening." She walked to the large windows overlooking the garden, her mother's sanctuary that Olivia had maintained meticulously since her death. The first snow of December had dusted the dormant rose bushes, creating a landscape as barren as her prospects now felt. The implications of Isabella's note extended far beyond one social event. It signaled a fundamental shift in her position within their closed society. Without the Bianchi's approval, without the protection of an alliance with a powerful family, Olivia's status had plummeted overnight. She was now damaged goods, a reminder of failed negotiations, an embarrassment to be handled discreetly. Her father would protect her physically, of course. No one would dare harm Lorenzo Donatelli's daughter. But socially? Professionally? The careful life she had constructed for herself, managing aspects of the family business, maintaining their connections, building a place of respect if not affection, had been built on her position within the hierarchy. That foundation was now crumbling beneath her feet. The telephone rang in the hallway, and Olivia heard Maria answer it. A moment later, the housekeeper appeared at the kitchen doorway, her expression grave. "It's your father, Miss Olivia. He says it's urgent." Olivia took the receiver, her composure never wavering despite the dread pooling in her stomach. "Papa?" Lorenzo's voice came through the line, tight with suppressed fury. "The meeting at the club has been moved. Suddenly, I'm told Frank Bianchi can't see me until next week. The Falcones have canceled our joint shipment arrangements effective immediately. And our friend at City Hall called. Our permit applications for the new restaurant location have been misplaced." The implications were clear. This wasn't just about a broken engagement anymore. This was about power, about punishment, about making an example of anyone who crossed the Falcone-Bianchi alliance. "I understand," Olivia said, keeping her voice steady. "What would you like me to do?" There was a long pause. "Pack a bag," Lorenzo finally said. "Not too much. We need to move you somewhere safe until I sort this out." "You think they would come after me?" The question wasn't fearful, merely analytical. "I think when men like Frank Bianchi and Anthony Falcone feel disrespected, they look for ways to send messages. And sometimes those messages involve the people we care about most." His voice softened slightly. "This isn't your fault, Liv, but I need you safe while I navigate this." After she hung up, Olivia stood motionless in the kitchen, absorbing the full weight of what had happened. A rejection based on her appearance had escalated into a family crisis that threatened everything her father had built. And it was all because she hadn't been beautiful enough, striking enough, impressive enough to satisfy Gabriel Falcone's vanity. Something cold and hard crystallized in Olivia's chest at that moment. Not just anger or humiliation, but a steely resolve. She would not be the weakness that brought down her family. She would not be the victim in this story. If she had to disappear for a while, so be it. But Olivia Donatelli would not stay hidden forever. And when she re-emerged, it would be on her own terms. The safe house was a small apartment above Rosa's bookshop, a dusty little establishment tucked between a bakery and a tailor in a quiet corner of Southside Chicago, far from the territories controlled by either the Falcones or the Bianchi organization. It was a property Lorenzo had acquired years ago through a series of shell corporations, a precaution for emergencies that had never been needed until now. Olivia stood at the window, a cup of cooling coffee forgotten in her hands as she watched evening descend on an unfamiliar street. 3 days had passed since her hurried departure from the family home, smuggled out in one of the delivery vans from their restaurant and transferred twice to different vehicles before arriving here after midnight. The apartment was Spartan, but clean. A bedroom, a tiny kitchen, a living area with worn but comfortable furniture. The bookshelves lining the walls provided the only personality, filled with everything from dog-eared paperbacks to leather-bound classics. In another situation, Olivia might have found comfort in their presence. Now, they only emphasized her isolation. A soft knock at the door broke her reverie. Angelo, her father's most trusted man, assigned as her protection, stood in the doorway. "Miss Donatelli, there's someone here to see you." Rosa from downstairs. Olivia set down her cup, surprised. She'd been instructed to avoid contact with anyone, even the elderly bookshop owner who apparently had no idea about the apartment's connection to the Donatelli family. "Did she say why?" Angelo shook his head. "Just that she has something for you. I've checked her. She's alone and not carrying anything suspicious." Curious despite herself, Olivia nodded. "You can send her up." A few minutes later, a small, wiry woman with steel-gray hair, pulled into a severe bun, entered the apartment. Despite her age, easily 70, possibly older, she moved with the quick, purposeful energy of someone half her years. Sharp eyes behind thick glasses took in Olivia's appearance with unsettling thoroughness. "So you're Lorenzo's daughter," she said without preamble, her accent heavy but her English clear. "He said you needed a quiet place to stay for a while. Didn't say why, but in our world, it's better not to ask too many questions, yes? Our world." The casual phrase stopped Olivia short. "You know my father?" Rosa made a dismissive gesture. "Everyone in the old neighborhoods knows everyone else's business, even when they pretend not to. Your father helped my late husband with some trouble many years ago. We have an understanding. She placed a paper bag on the small kitchen table. I brought you some pastries from Bellini's. And information. Olivia's attention sharpened. What kind of information? The kind that travels through back rooms and kitchens instead of boardrooms and social clubs. Rosa sat uninvited, fixing Olivia with a penetrating stare. The kind that concerns you directly. For the next 20 minutes, Rosa outlined what she had gleaned from her network of friends, relatives, and customers. An informal intelligence system that operated in the shadows of the formal organization. The picture she painted was darker than Olivia had imagined. The Falcones were leveraging the broken engagement to make a larger play against Lorenzo. Rumors suggested they had been planning this move for months, using the marriage arrangement as a way to get close enough to assess the Donatelli operation's vulnerabilities. Gabriel's rejection of Olivia, while genuine in its shallow assessment, had been encouraged by Anthony Falcone as the trigger to initiate their plan. They're saying your father has grown soft, Rosa continued, her voice matter of fact, that his focus on legitimate businesses shows weakness. That having only a daughter instead of sons has left him without a proper legacy. Each word was a small cut, but Olivia maintained her composure. And my father? What's happening with him? Rosa's expression softened slightly. He's fighting back, of course. Lorenzo was never one to take disrespect lightly, but he's outnumbered. The Bianchis have sided completely with the Falcones. 3 of your father's captains have already switched allegiance. Rats leaving a sinking ship, Olivia murmured. Precisely. Rosa nodded approval at her understanding. Your father is meeting tonight with some old allies, men who owe him favors from the early days. But, she hesitated, but they may not be enough. Olivia finished for her. The reality was crystallizing with brutal clarity. This wasn't just about her safety anymore. Her father's entire position, the empire he'd built over decades, was in jeopardy. All because of a rejection based on her appearance. A rejection that had given their enemies the opening they'd been waiting for. After Rosa left, Olivia paced the small apartment, mind racing. She needed information. Needed to understand exactly what her father was facing. Needed to find a way to help him without becoming the liability his enemies thought she was. Angelo watched her from his position near the door, his face impassive but his eyes alert. I need to make a phone call, she said suddenly. Is there a secure line? Angelo hesitated. Your father was clear about maintaining complete isolation. This isn't about me anymore, Angelo. This is about our family's survival. Olivia faced him directly, her voice low but intense. You've served my father for 15 years. You know what's at stake. Something in her expression must have convinced him. Angelo nodded once and produced a small black phone from his jacket pocket. This line is clean, but make it quick and tell no one where you are. Olivia dialed a number from memory, not her father's direct line, but one that would reach Tommaso. His consigliere for over 20 years, and the only person besides Lorenzo himself who understood the full scope of their operations. When Tommaso answered, his usual smooth greeting was replaced by cautious wariness. It's Olivia, she said simply. A pause, then. Madonna mia, are you safe? Your father has been worried sick. I'm fine. But I need to know exactly what we're facing. All of it, Tommaso. No sugarcoating because I'm a woman or Lorenzo's daughter. Another pause, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted to the precise, analytical tone he used for business matters. For the next hour, Tommaso outlined the full extent of the crisis. The alliances crumbling, the territories being contested, the suppliers and distributors suddenly developing logistical issues with Donatelli shipments. The picture was grim, but not yet hopeless. Lorenzo still had loyalists, still controlled key assets, still held enough secrets about rival families to maintain some leverage. But we're losing ground daily, Tommaso concluded. Your father is trying to arrange a sit-down with the Detroit outfit. They've had their own conflicts with the Bianchis, and the enemy of my enemy might become an ally, Olivia finished. The Detroit connection was unexpected but made strategic sense. When is this meeting, if it happens at all? 3 days from now. But it's a long shot. The Russos in Detroit have always kept their distance from Chicago politics. After ending the call, Olivia stood motionless in the center of the small living room, processing everything she'd learned. The scope of the disaster was larger than she'd feared, the danger to her father more immediate. And all of it, could be traced back to a single moment of rejection based on nothing more substantial than her failure to meet Gabriel Falcone's superficial standards of beauty. The unfairness of it struck her with sudden, breath-stealing force. All her life, she had played by the rules of their world. She had been the perfect daughter, the capable manager, the discreet keeper of secrets. She had prepared to be the perfect Mafia wife, ready to stand beside a man she didn't love for the sake of family alliance. And none of it had mattered because her face wasn't striking enough, her figure not curvaceous enough, her presence not dazzling enough to satisfy a vain man's ego. For the first time since Gabriel's rejection, Olivia allowed herself to feel the full force of the humiliation and rage she had carefully contained. Alone in this anonymous apartment, far from the family who needed her, and the world that had judged her, she finally broke. Her knees gave way, and she sank to the floor, arms wrapped around herself as silent sobs tore through her body. Years of careful composure shattered in those moments. Not just the pain of Gabriel's rejection, but the accumulated weight of always being measured and found wanting. Too serious, too plain, too much her father's daughter, never enough, never quite right, never the woman she was expected to be. Angelo, witnessing her breakdown from the doorway, quietly withdrew to give her privacy, his own face tight with a mixture of sympathy and discomfort at seeing the always controlled Donatelli daughter in such a state. Olivia didn't know how long she remained there, curled into herself on the worn carpet of a safe house she never should have needed to occupy. When the storm finally passed, leaving her hollow and exhausted, she dragged herself to the small bathroom and confronted her reflection in the mirror. Red-rimmed eyes stared back at her from a face stripped of pretense. Her hair, usually so carefully arranged, hung limply around features she had been told were too strong, too serious, too plain. She studied herself with a detachment that felt new, seeing not the inadequacies that Gabriel had rejected, but the strength in her jawline, the intelligence in her eyes, the resilience that had survived 23 years in a world that valued women primarily as decorations and bargaining chips. "Enough," she whispered to her reflection, voice hoarse from crying but steady with newfound resolve. No more hiding, no more shame. Whatever happened next, Olivia Donatelli would face it on her own terms. She would no longer measure her worth through the eyes of men like Gabriel Falcone, and she would not, could not, remain safely hidden while her father fought a battle triggered by her rejection. It was time to reclaim her place in the family business, not as a daughter to be married off for alliance, not as an asset to be protected, but as a Donatelli in her own right. The only question was how. Morning light filtered through dusty blinds, casting striped shadows across the small apartment. Olivia sat at the kitchen table, a cup of strong espresso cooling beside her, surrounded by papers she had spent the night organizing. Sleep had been elusive after her emotional breakdown, her mind too restless with half-formed plans and calculations. Instead of fighting the insomnia, she had channeled it into productivity. Angelo watched with quiet concern as she worked through the night, but he didn't interfere. Something had changed in Olivia, a shift in her demeanor that commanded a new kind of respect. The vulnerability of yesterday had hardened into something steely and focused. "I need to go out," Olivia announced, gathering the papers into a neat stack. Angelo straightened immediately. "Your father's instructions were clear, Miss Donatelli. You're to remain here until—" "I understand my father's concerns," she interrupted, her tone gentle but firm. "But circumstances have changed. I'm not asking permission, Angelo. I'm telling you my plans as a courtesy, because I respect your position." The bodyguard's expression tightened with conflicted loyalty. "Where do you need to go?" "First, to see Rosa downstairs. Then to visit Father Malone at St. Michael's." She met Angelo's skeptical gaze directly. "Both locations can be approached discreetly, and neither has connections to the Falcones or Bianchis." "A bookshop owner and a priest," Angelo said flatly. "What can they possibly offer in this situation?" Olivia's smile was small but confident. "Information and connections, the two most valuable currencies in our world." An hour later, Olivia sat in Rosa's cluttered back office behind the bookshop. The elderly woman had locked the front door, turning the open sign to closed without hesitation when Olivia explained what she needed. "These names," Rosa said, examining the list Olivia had prepared. "Some I know, some I don't. This one." She tapped a name near the bottom. "Valentina Russo. You're playing with fire. The Detroit connection." "Yes, I know." Olivia took a sip of the strong, sweet coffee Rosa had prepared. "That's exactly why I need to reach her." Rosa's eyes narrowed behind her thick glasses. "The Russos are not people to approach lightly, especially for a Donatelli right now." "What makes you think Valentina would even speak with you?" "Because she's in exactly the same position I am." Olivia leaned forward. "Daughter of a powerful family, no brothers to carry the legacy, underestimated because she's a woman. The difference is, her father had the wisdom to bring her into the business officially. Understanding dawned in Rosa's expression. "You've been doing your research. Knowledge has always been my strength," Olivia replied. "While the men were focusing on territories and muscle, I was learning about the people behind the power. Valentina runs the books for the entire Russo operation. She's the reason they've expanded so successfully in the last 5 years." Rosa nodded slowly, reassessing the young woman before her. "And the others on this list? Small business owners in our old neighborhoods. A retired cop who still has connections at the precinct. The widow of Judge Moretti." Olivia ticked them off methodically. People with information, influence, or resources that operate outside the traditional organization structure. People who might help for the right incentives. People your father may have overlooked, Rosa added perceptively. "Not overlooked exactly, just categorized differently." Olivia chose her words carefully. "My father is a brilliant strategist, but he comes from a generation with certain blind spots. Women, immigrants, people in service positions, they're often invisible in the calculations of men like Anthony Falcone or Frank Bianchi, and you plan to leverage these invisible players." It wasn't a question. Rosa was nodding with growing approval. "Smart, unexpected, but what exactly are you hoping to achieve? The Falcones have numbers, territory, and momentum on their side." Olivia stood, moving to the small window that overlooked the quiet street. "I'm not trying to win their war. I just need to change the battlefield long enough for my father to regain his footing." She turned back to face Rosa. "Can you help me reach these people?" Discreetly. The older woman's face creased in a smile that held more calculation than warmth. "For Lorenzo's daughter? Of course. But there will be a price. Name it. When this is over, assuming you succeed, I want a seat at the table. Not for myself. I'm too old for such things. But for my grandson, Marco. He's smart, educated, loyal. He deserves better than running numbers for the Pescatore crew." It was a significant ask, offering a position in the family business to an outsider. But Olivia recognized the value of what Rosa was offering. Her network of connections would open doors that would otherwise remain firmly closed. "If we survive this, your grandson will have his opportunity," Olivia agreed. "On a trial basis initially, with room to advance based on his abilities. I give you my word." They shook hands, the informal contract as binding as any legal document in their world. By mid-afternoon, Olivia was sitting in the quiet confessional of St. Michael's Church, speaking in low tones with Father Malone. The aging priest had known her since childhood and had heard the confessions of half the major players in Chicago's underworld. His collar granted him access to information and secrets that even the most connected consigliere couldn't obtain. "What you're proposing walks a dangerous line, Olivia," he said, his Irish brogue thickening with concern. "Not just physically dangerous, though there's that too, but morally." "I'm not asking anyone to commit violence, Father," Olivia assured him. "Just to redirect certain information, to make specific introductions, to help restore balance." Father Malone sighed heavily. "You speak of balance, but we both know this world operates on power and fear. Your father's business, let's not pretend it's something it isn't, has caused suffering. As have the Falcones and the Bianchis." Olivia absorbed the rebuke with composure. "I'm well aware of the moral complexities, Father. But right now, innocent people who depend on my father's protection are caught in the crossfire. Restaurant workers, shopkeepers, families who've done nothing wrong except live in territories that are suddenly contested. The chaos is hurting them most of all." It was a calculated appeal, but not a dishonest one. The priest's weathered face showed he recognized the truth in her words. In their imperfect world, stability, even stability maintained by imperfect means, often protected the innocent more effectively than upheaval. "There's a deacon at Sacred Heart," Father Malone said finally. "He counsels the Russo family when they're in Chicago. A good man, despite his complicated parishioners. He might be willing to facilitate an introduction to Valentina." Olivia nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Father." "And the other matter? The documents you requested are in the envelope behind the hymnal in the third pew." His expression was troubled. "I hope you understand the gravity of what you're undertaking, Olivia. Once you step fully into this world, on your own terms rather than as Lorenzo's daughter, there's no going back to the life you had before." Olivia thought of that life, the carefully maintained position as the perfect daughter, the expectations of becoming the perfect wife, the constant awareness of being judged and found wanting for factors beyond her control. She thought of Gabriel's dismissive assessment, Isabella's cruel exclusion, the ease with which years of loyalty and service had been erased by a single rejection. "The life I had before," she said quietly, "no longer exists, Father. It was destroyed the moment Gabriel Falcone decided I wasn't beautiful enough to be his wife." She met the priest's concerned gaze directly. "Now I need to build something new from the ashes. Something that can't be taken away so easily." As she left the church, envelopes securely tucked into her purse, and a list of contacts provided by both Rosa and Father Malone, Olivia felt a strange sense of liberation beneath the weight of her circumstances. For the first time, she was charting her own course rather than following the path laid out by others' expectations. Angela waited in the car, visibly relieved when she emerged unharmed. "Back to the safe house now, Miss Donatelli?" Olivia shook her head, checking her watch. "No, we have one more stop to make. A little dress shop on Wabash Avenue." Angelo's confusion was evident, but he didn't question her. As they pulled away from the church, Olivia glanced at her reflection in the car window. The serious eyes, the strong features, the expression of quiet determination that had replaced the shame and uncertainty of days before. Gabriel had rejected her for being too plain, too unremarkable to stand beside him. But Olivia was beginning to understand that sometimes being underestimated was the greatest advantage of all. The Drake Hotel stood like a sentinel on Chicago's Gold Coast, its elegant architecture a testament to old money and discreet power. In its luxurious meeting rooms and private dining areas, deals were struck that shaped the city's future, often without a word appearing in any official record. Olivia sat alone at a corner table in the hotel's restaurant, positioned to observe both the main entrance and the kitchen doors. She wore a simple but impeccably tailored charcoal suit, a calculated choice that projected quiet authority rather than attempting to compete with the flashier styles favored by Mafia wives and girlfriends. Her dark hair was swept into a sleek chignon, emphasizing the clean lines of her face that Gabriel had dismissed as too plain. A small leather portfolio rested on the table beside her untouched coffee cup. Inside were documents that represented 3 days of intensive work: financial records, property deeds, police reports, and handwritten notes connecting seemingly disparate pieces of information into a coherent pattern. She checked her watch. 10:15 a.m. The meeting was scheduled for 10:30, but Olivia had arrived early to secure the ideal position and observe the hotel's rhythm. Angelo was stationed in the lobby, while 2 other trusted men, borrowed from her father's diminishing circle of loyalists, maintained positions near the service entrance and in the bar overlooking the restaurant. At precisely 10:25, a woman entered through the main doors, pausing to survey the space with practiced casualness. Valentina Russo was everything Olivia had expected from her research: mid-30s, expensively but conservatively dressed, with an air of contained competence that commanded respect without demanding attention. Only the subtle details, the quality of her pearl earrings, the perfect cut of her navy dress, hinted at her family's wealth and position. Their eyes met across the room, 2 women recognizing something familiar in each other despite never having met. Valentina approached Olivia's table with unhurried confidence, extending her hand in a business-like greeting. "Miss Donatelli, you've caused quite a stir with your request for this meeting." Olivia rose, matching Valentina's firm handshake. "I appreciate you taking the risk, Miss Russo, especially under the current circumstances." A server appeared as they sat, but Valentina waved him away with a polite gesture. "I've allocated exactly 30 minutes for this conversation. I suggest we dispense with pleasantries and get directly to your purpose." "Of course." Olivia opened the portfolio and removed a single sheet of paper, sliding it across the table. "These are the terms my father is prepared to offer for your family's support in the current disagreement with the Falcone-Bianchi alliance." Valentina glanced at the document, her expression revealing nothing. "These are generous terms." "Suspiciously so, considering your father's weakened position." "My father doesn't know I'm here," Olivia admitted, meeting Valentina's surprised gaze steadily. "Nor does he know about this specific proposal, but he will honor it if you accept." "You're negotiating without authorization?" Valentina's voice held a new note, something between incredulity and reluctant respect. "That's either extremely brave or extremely foolish." "It's necessary," Olivia replied simply. "The official channels are compromised. The scheduled meeting between our organizations has been postponed twice already. Delays engineered by Bianchi's people to weaken my father's position further before any negotiation can occur." Valentina studied her thoughtfully. "So Lorenzo Donatelli's daughter takes matters into her own hands. Interesting." She tapped a manicured finger against the document. "But these terms: access to your Chicago shipping channels, favorable rates at the docks, mutual defense arrangements. Require your father's explicit approval, which he will give, once you've signaled your willingness to negotiate directly with him. Olivia leaned forward slightly. What I'm offering today is not the agreement itself, but a pathway to that agreement without Falcone interference. Valentina's silence stretched as she assessed both the proposal and the woman presenting it. Finally, she asked the question Olivia had been expecting from the moment they sat down. Why did the engagement really end? The directness didn't surprise Olivia, but the flicker of genuine curiosity behind it did. This wasn't just a negotiating tactic. Valentina actually wanted to know. Gabriel Falcone found me too plain to be his wife, Olivia answered, her voice matter of fact. He required someone who would make a more striking impression when she entered a room. Something flashed in Valentina's eyes, a brief, fierce recognition of a familiar wound. And this meeting? This proposal? It's about revenge for that humiliation? No, Olivia said, with a certainty that surprised even herself. It's about demonstrating that value comes in forms beyond the superficial. It's about protecting what my father has built. And yes, she added with unflinching honesty, it's about proving that underestimating me, underestimating women like us, is a costly mistake. The corner of Valentina's mouth curved in the barest hint of a smile. Women like us, she repeated softly. You've done your research, I see. Thoroughly, Olivia confirmed. Just as I suspect you've done yours on me. You wouldn't be here otherwise. Valentina nodded, acknowledging the point. She slid the proposal back across the table. I can't accept these terms today. You know that. I do. But, Valentina continued, reaching into her purse to extract a business card, I can agree to bring this to my uncle's attention. To advocate for direct negotiations without further delays. She placed the card beside Olivia's portfolio. My private number. Not my family's. Mine. The distinction was clear and significant. This wasn't just a business courtesy. It was the beginning of a potential alliance within an alliance, a recognition between two women who navigated similar waters. As Valentina stood to leave, she paused, studying Olivia with new consideration. One piece of advice, Miss Donatelli. From someone who has walked this path longer than you. Olivia waited, attentive. When men like Gabriel Falcone call us too plain, what they really mean is that we see too clearly. That we can't be distracted or dazzled by their superficial charms. Valentina adjusted her perfectly tailored jacket. They find that terrifying, and they should. With that, she departed, leaving Olivia with the small white card and a sense that something significant had shifted in her world. The meeting had lasted exactly 30 minutes, as promised, but its repercussions would extend far beyond this elegant hotel restaurant. As Olivia gathered her materials, a movement at the bar caught her attention. A man had been watching their meeting with unconcealed interest, tall, broad-shouldered, with features that suggested Italian heritage softened by American generations. He wore no flashy jewelry or designer labels, but his quiet confidence and the respectful distance maintained by other patrons marked him as someone of significance. Their eyes met briefly across the space, and something in his gaze, a direct, assessing look that held neither the dismissive judgment of Gabriel nor the calculating evaluation of most organization men, made Olivia pause. The man inclined his head slightly in acknowledgement before turning away, but not before Olivia caught the small movement of his hand adjusting his tie pin, a distinctive silver design she recognized immediately as belonging to the Russo organization's inner circle. Daniel Russo. Valentina's cousin, and Joseph Russo's most trusted lieutenant. Olivia maintained her composed expression as she left the restaurant, but her mind was racing with implications. The presence of not one but two high-ranking Russo family members at this meeting suggested her proposal was being taken far more seriously than Valentina had indicated. For the first time since Gabriel's rejection had upended her world, Olivia felt something unfamiliar unfurl in her chest. Not just determination or calculation, but a spark of genuine hope. The next week unfolded in a careful dance of moves and countermoves. Olivia divided her time between the safe house apartment and a series of discreet meetings arranged through Rosa's network. Always careful, always watchful, she wove a web of small alliances and information channels that operated beneath the notice of the major players. 3 days after the Drake Hotel meeting, Lorenzo Donatelli received a phone call from Joseph Russo himself, suggesting a private meeting without intermediaries. The Detroit organization was suddenly open to negotiation, expressing particular interest in the shipping arrangements Olivia had outlined in her unauthorized proposal. Lorenzo, showing the strategic acumen that had kept him alive for decades in a dangerous business. Asked no questions about this unexpected development. He simply seized the opportunity, moving quickly to solidify the tentative alliance before the Falcones could intervene. Olivia, monitoring these developments from her position in the shadows, allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The first piece of her plan had fallen into place, but it was only the beginning. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, Olivia sat in the back corner of a small Italian cafe, 10 blocks from Little Sicily. The establishment was owned by Rosa's cousin and operated outside the traditional protection territories of the major families, neutral ground where conversations could occur without immediate repercussions. She was reviewing a set of ledgers provided by one of her growing network of informants when a presence at her table made her look up. Daniel Russo stood there, his tall frame blocking the view from the front windows, a steaming espresso cup in his hand. "Miss Donatelli," he said, his voice lower and more measured than she had expected. "Mind if I join you?" Olivia carefully closed the ledger before gesturing to the empty chair across from her. "I wasn't aware we had an appointment, Mr. Russo." He sat with the fluid grace of a man, comfortable in his physical power but disciplined enough to contain it. Up close, she could see that his eyes were an unusual shade, amber rather than the typical dark brown of Italian heritage, with a directness that matched his cousin's. "We don't," he acknowledged, setting down his cup. "Consider this a fortunate coincidence." They both knew there were no coincidences in their world. He had tracked her here deliberately, and they both knew it. The question was why. "Your meeting with Valentina made quite an impression," Daniel continued, his gaze steady on her face. "Our organization doesn't often encounter women who negotiate as equals in this business." "Perhaps you're not looking in the right places," Olivia replied, meeting his gaze without hesitation. "Or perhaps we've learned to navigate without being noticed." A smile touched his lips briefly. Genuine amusement, rather than condescension. "A fair point. Though you seem to have abandoned that approach recently. Your movements have been conspicuous." The observation carried a warning, but also something else. A note of respect, perhaps even admiration. Olivia considered her response carefully. "Desperate times call for visible measures," she said finally. "My father's position required immediate action." "Your father's position," Daniel repeated thoughtfully. "Not yours? They're one and the same." "Are they?" He studied her with those unusual amber eyes. "From what I understand, Lorenzo Donatelli has kept you insulated from the operational side of the business, protected, as it were." The words could have been an insult, a reminder of her peripheral status, but something in his tone suggested a different interpretation. He wasn't dismissing her. He was trying to understand where she truly stood. "My father believes in traditional roles," Olivia acknowledged, "but he also raised me to understand how our world works. Knowledge isn't the same as participation, but it can be equally valuable in the right circumstances." Daniel nodded slowly. "Like knowing exactly what terms might entice the Russo family into an alliance, despite decades of careful neutrality regarding Chicago politics." She didn't answer directly, instead taking a sip of her cooling coffee. "The proposal benefits both our families. That's good business, not special knowledge." The Benton Harbor shipment information proved to be the first of many exchanges between Olivia and Daniel over the following weeks. Their meetings remained ostensibly accidental. A chance encounter at a downtown restaurant, an unexpected meeting at the Art Institute, a brief conversation in the back of Rosa's bookshop. Each time, information or insights would be shared, wrapped in careful layers of plausible deniability should either family question their interactions. To outside observers, these might have appeared to be routine contacts between allied organizations, but beneath the surface, something more complex was developing. A connection based on mutual respect and a shared understanding that went beyond family loyalty or business necessity. January brought bitter cold to Chicago, the kind that turned Lake Michigan into a vast frozen landscape and drove even the most hardened criminals indoors when possible. In this frozen quiet, Lorenzo Donatelli began to rebuild his position, the alliance with the Russos providing crucial stability, while he consolidated his remaining loyal associates and identified which business relationships could be salvaged. Olivia had resumed living in the family home, though security had been dramatically increased. Her role had evolved too, subtly but significantly. Lorenzo now openly consulted her on business matters, acknowledged her insights in family meetings, and had begun introducing her to his key associates not merely as "my daughter," but as "my most trusted advisor." The change wasn't lost on the organization. Whispers spread about the Donatelli daughter who had engineered the Russo alliance, who had outmaneuvered Frank Bianchi's attempts to freeze Lorenzo out of critical supply chains, who had somehow identified and neutralized 2 informants within their inner circle. The same men who had once barely acknowledged her presence now watched her with cautious respect. Gabriel Falcone's rejection, intended to humiliate, had instead catalyzed her transformation from sheltered daughter to emerging power in her own right. On a particularly brutal Friday evening, with the temperature hovering near zero and snow piling in drifts against the windows, Olivia sat alone in her father's study. Lorenzo was attending a wake for an old associate, an obligation that couldn't be avoided despite the weather and ongoing security concerns. The house was quiet. Most of the staff sent home before the worst of the storm hit. Only Angelo and 2 other guards remained, positioned strategically throughout the property. Olivia had taken advantage of the solitude to work through a stack of invoices from their restaurant suppliers, looking for discrepancies that might indicate continued interference from the Falcones. A soft knock at the study door interrupted her concentration. Angelo stood in the doorway, his expression uncharacteristically uncertain. "Miss Donatelli, there's someone here to see you." Olivia frowned. "In this weather? Who would?" "Daniel Russo," Angelo replied, lowering his voice, though there was no one else to hear. "He insists it's urgent. I've checked him for weapons. He's clean." Surprise momentarily displaced Olivia's customary composure. Their careful pattern of accidental meetings made this direct approach significant and potentially dangerous for both of them. "Show him in," she said, quickly gathering the sensitive documents from the desk. Daniel entered moments later, snow melting from his heavy wool coat and expensive leather shoes. Despite the weather's assault, he maintained that essential quality of contained strength that Olivia had come to recognize as uniquely his. Unlike so many men in their world who broadcast their power through flash and aggression, Daniel carried his authority with quiet certainty. "This is unexpected," Olivia said once Angelo had closed the door, leaving them alone. "Necessity overruled caution," Daniel replied, removing his coat to reveal a tailored charcoal suit beneath. "I have information that couldn't wait for our next coincidental meeting." "What's happened?" "The Falcones have put out a contract on your father." The words were delivered with blunt precision. "Not through their usual channels. They've brought in outside talent from New York. Professional, discreet, scheduled to arrive tomorrow morning on the 8:15 train from Grand Central." Olivia's blood ran cold. "How certain is this information?" "Completely." Daniel met her gaze directly. "The source is someone who owes me personally, not the Russo family, someone who has never been wrong." "I need to call my father." "Already being handled," Daniel interrupted gently. "I spoke with my uncle before coming here. He's sending 2 of our men to the wake to quietly extract Lorenzo and take him to a secure location. By now, they should already be with him." Relief surged through Olivia, followed immediately by confusion. "Then why come here? Why risk being seen entering the Donatelli home?" Daniel moved closer, his expression more open than she had ever seen it. "Because the contract isn't just on Lorenzo. Your name was added 3 days ago." The revelation landed with physical force. Olivia sank back against the desk, mind racing to process the implications. "They consider me a threat now. Not just Lorenzo's daughter, but a player in my own right." "Yes." Daniel's voice carried an edge of something fierce. "Which is why I'm here. The storm has bought us some time. The New York flight will almost certainly be delayed until tomorrow afternoon. But we need to move you somewhere secure immediately." Olivia straightened, professional calm reasserting itself. "I have options. Safe houses that even my father doesn't know about." "The Falcones will be watching all known Donatelli properties and associates," Daniel countered. "Your network of informants may already be compromised." "What do you suggest then?" Daniel held her gaze steadily. "Come with me. To a place not connected to either of our families. Somewhere they would never think to look for you." The offer hung between them, weighted with implications beyond immediate safety. This wasn't merely business anymore. This was Daniel Russo personally intervening, placing himself between Olivia and danger. Why? The question was simple but carried layers of meaning. Why risk so much? Why step beyond the boundaries of their careful alliance? Daniel's expression softened almost imperceptibly. From his inner suit pocket, he withdrew a small, flat object wrapped in tissue paper and handed it to her. Puzzled, Olivia unwrapped it carefully. Inside lay an antique silver hand mirror, its handle intricately worked with vines and flowers, the glass surface spotless despite its evident age. It was beautiful, but she didn't understand its significance. "It belonged to my grandmother," Daniel explained, his voice low and intimate in the quiet room. She brought it from Sicily in 1908, one of the few possessions she managed to keep through Ellis Island and the early struggles. She gave it to me before she died and told me to give it only to a woman with eyes that could truly see. The personal nature of the gift, its family history, its sentimental value, struck Olivia deeply. This wasn't a business transaction or strategic alliance. This was something she had never expected to find in their harsh world, genuine connection. "I don't know what to say," she admitted, running her finger gently along the silver handle. "Say you'll come with me," Daniel replied simply. "Not just for safety, though that's reason enough, but because I think we both know this is about more than family alliances or business strategies now." Olivia looked up from the mirror to study his face, the steady amber eyes that had never dismissed her as too plain, the strong features that revealed emotion only to those patient enough to learn their language. In this man's gaze, she had never been a commodity to be traded or an ornament to be displayed. From their very first meeting, he had seen her, truly seen her, not for her appearance but for her mind, her strength, her essence. "Yes," she said finally, the single word carrying the weight of decision that would alter both their paths irrevocably. "I'll come with you." Daniel's relief was visible only in the slight relaxation of his shoulders, but to Olivia, who had learned to read the subtle language of his expressions, it spoke volumes. As she gathered essential items and left instructions for Angelo, Olivia caught her reflection in the ornate mirror behind her father's desk. The woman who looked back at her was no longer the dutiful daughter waiting for approval, no longer the rejected bride nursing wounded pride. In her place stood someone stronger, sharper, more fully herself, a woman whose value had never depended on Gabriel Falcone's shallow assessment of her features, a woman whose fierce eyes now held the future firmly in their sights. The lake house stood on a secluded stretch of Michigan shoreline, its weathered cedar exterior blending with the winter landscape. Nestled among towering pines and protected by natural barriers on three sides, it offered both security and seclusion, the perfect haven for someone who needed to disappear. "My mother's family owned it," Daniel explained as he led Olivia through the main room, where a fire already crackled in the stone hearth. "They were legitimate business people, lumber and shipping. No connections to either Chicago or Detroit families. No one would think to look for us here." The interior was comfortable rather than luxurious. Solid wooden furniture, well-worn rugs, and shelves lined with books and old photographs. It felt lived in, personal in a way that safe houses never did. "You come here often," Olivia observed. It wasn't a question. Daniel nodded, setting down her small suitcase. "When I need to think clearly, when the family business becomes overwhelming." For 3 days, they existed in a strange pocket of tranquility, removed from the dangerous currents of their normal lives. During daylight hours, they maintained regular contact with their respective organizations through secure channels. Lorenzo had been safely extracted and was now under Russo protection in Detroit. The New York hitman had been intercepted at Chicago's Union Station by a joint team of Donatelli and Russo men. A clear message to the Falcones that the rules had changed. But in the evenings, something remarkable happened. The careful professional distance they had maintained through weeks of strategic meetings began to dissolve. Over simple meals cooked in the lake house's rustic kitchen, they talked, really talked, about things beyond business and survival. Daniel spoke of his childhood dreams of becoming an architect before family obligation pulled him into the organization. Olivia shared her love of classical literature and her secret hobby of translating Italian poetry. They discovered shared perspectives on family loyalty, mutual frustration with outdated traditions, and a common vision for how their world could evolve beyond the endless cycles of violence and retribution. On the 4th night, as they sat before the fire with glasses of rich red wine, Daniel turned to Olivia with an expression she hadn't seen before, a vulnerability that his carefully maintained control rarely allowed. "I've been thinking about Gabriel Falcone," he said quietly. Olivia tensed slightly. Gabriel's name had not been mentioned between them until now. "What about him?" she asked, keeping her tone neutral. "I'm trying to understand how a man could look at you, really look at you, and see anything but extraordinary beauty." The words hung in the fire-lit air between them. Olivia felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the flames or the wine. "You don't have to say that," she replied, her voice soft but steady. "I've made peace with who I am, with what I look like." Daniel set his glass down and moved closer, his gaze never leaving her face. "I'm not saying it to make you feel better, Olivia. I'm saying it because it's true." His hand reached up, hesitated, then gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. From the first moment I saw you at the Drake, watching you negotiate with Valentina, I couldn't look away. Your intelligence, your composure, the way you carry yourself, these aren't separate from your beauty. They're essential parts of it. Olivia found herself unable to deflect with her usual poise. Something in his earnest expression, in the gentle touch that lingered near her cheek, broke through defenses she hadn't even realized she still maintained. Gabriel wanted a trophy, Daniel continued. Something to display, to prove his own worth to others. But a man who needs that kind of validation isn't worthy of a woman like you. When he kissed her, it was nothing like the calculated moves of ambitious men who had occasionally tried to win her favor. It was honest, vulnerable, and asked as much as it offered. Olivia found herself responding with a depth of feeling she had never allowed herself to acknowledge, let alone express. Later that night, wrapped in quiet intimacy, Olivia confessed her deepest fear, that whatever was growing between them would inevitably be crushed by the realities of their world, by family loyalties and business necessities. Daniel traced the curve of her cheek with gentle fingers. Maybe, he admitted, or maybe we're exactly what both families need, a bridge built on something stronger than temporary alliances or business arrangements. A love match instead of a strategic one? Olivia's smile was wistful. Our world doesn't operate that way. Our world is changing, Daniel replied, and we could be part of that change. The ringing telephone shattered their private sanctuary. Daniel answered, his expression shifting immediately from tender to alert. After a brief exchange, he hung up and turned to Olivia with grave eyes. We need to go back, he said simply. There's been a development. The Monroe Hotel's grand ballroom had been transformed for the annual Policemen's Benevolent Association charity gala, an event attended by Chicago's elite from both sides of the law. Politicians, wealthy businessmen, and high-ranking police officials mingled in a carefully choreographed dance of influence and obligation. For families like the Donatellis and Falcones, it represented a critical opportunity to maintain the relationships that kept their operations running smoothly. This year, the gala carried additional significance. It would be Lorenzo Donatelli's first public appearance since the failed hit attempt, a deliberate statement that he remained a power to be reckoned with. The presence of Joseph Russo and key members of the Detroit organization at his side would cement the new alliance in the eyes of everyone who mattered in Chicago. What no one expected was Olivia Donatelli's entrance on the arm of Daniel Russo. They arrived after the event was in full swing, timing their appearance to ensure maximum impact. Olivia wore a gown of deep burgundy silk that moved like liquid around her slender figure, its elegant simplicity, a deliberate contrast to the flashier styles favored by most women in attendance. Her dark hair was swept up to emphasize the clean lines of her face, her only jewelry, a pair of diamond earrings that had belonged to her mother, and the antique silver brooch that Daniel had given her, a companion piece to the mirror, worn publicly as a silent declaration. The room didn't fall silent. These people were too sophisticated for such obvious reactions, but a subtle ripple of awareness spread through the crowd. Conversations paused, glances were exchanged, assessments recalibrated. Lorenzo, standing with Joseph Russo near the main table, saw them first. His eyes widened momentarily before his practiced composure reasserted itself. Joseph's reaction was more visible. A raised eyebrow and a thoughtful nod that suggested this development, while unexpected, was not entirely unwelcome. "Ready?" Daniel asked quietly, his hand steady at the small of Olivia's back. Olivia surveyed the room with clear eyes, noting the strategic positions of various power players, and, most significantly, the shocked expression on Gabriel Falcone's face as he stood frozen beside his father. His companion for the evening, a statuesque blonde whose striking beauty was as manufactured as her smile, followed his gaze with confusion, clearly sensing the sudden tension. "Perfectly ready," Olivia replied, her voice calm and assured. Together, they made their way through the crowd, accepting greetings with poised acknowledgments but moving deliberately toward Lorenzo and Joseph. This was no casual social appearance but a carefully orchestrated statement, not just of alliance between families, but of partnership between equals. As they approached the two patriarchs, Olivia felt Daniel's hand tighten slightly against her back, a silent signal of support for what they both knew would be a pivotal moment. Lorenzo stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "Olivia. Daniel. This is unexpected. Is it, Papa?" Olivia met her father's gaze directly. "Or is it simply the natural evolution of the partnership you and Joseph have been building?" Joseph Russo's weathered face creased in a subtle smile. "My nephew has always had excellent judgment," he observed, his eyes moving between Olivia and Daniel with shrewd assessment. "In business and, apparently, in matters of the heart as well." The public acknowledgement, oblique but unmistakable, sent another ripple through the watching crowd. This wasn't merely a personal connection being revealed. It was a dramatic reconfiguration of power dynamics between two major organizations. Before Lorenzo could respond, a new voice interrupted. Smooth, controlled, but with an undercurrent of barely suppressed anger. "Well, isn't this a touching family reunion?" Gabriel Falcone stood before them, his handsome features arranged in an expression of casual disdain that didn't quite mask the shock and jealousy beneath. His gaze swept over Olivia dismissively before fixing on Daniel with unconcealed hostility. "Russo, slumming with rejected merchandise now? I wouldn't have expected such compromised taste from Detroit's golden boy." The crude insult hung in the air like a thrown gauntlet. Conversations nearby faltered as people sensed the dangerous undercurrents. Security personnel along the walls shifted subtly, hands moving closer to concealed weapons. Daniel's body tensed, but before he could respond, Olivia stepped forward, positioning herself directly in Gabriel's line of sight. Her expression remained composed, but her eyes, those fierce, intelligent eyes that had always unsettled him, fixed on his face with such intensity that he involuntarily took a half-step back. "Mr. Falcone," she said, her voice carrying just far enough to reach the circle of influential observers around them. "How fortunate to have this opportunity to thank you publicly." Gabriel blinked, thrown by the unexpected response. "Thank me? Yes," Olivia continued, her smile polite but her gaze unwavering. "Your rejection was the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. It forced me to stop measuring my worth through other people's limited vision." She turned slightly, including their audience in her next words. "You see, Mr. Falcone wanted a beautiful ornament to enhance his image. What he failed to understand is that true power doesn't come from what stands beside you at social gatherings. It comes from vision, intelligence, and the courage to see beyond superficial appearances." Her gaze returned to Gabriel, who stood rigid with humiliation as the implications of her words registered with the watching crowd. "So thank you, sincerely, for releasing me from an arrangement that would have wasted both our lives. You freed me to find someone who sees with clearer eyes than yours will ever manage." The silence that followed was absolute. Then Joseph Russo began to laugh, a genuine, appreciative sound that broke the tension and signaled to everyone present how they should interpret what they had just witnessed. Gabriel's face flushed dark with fury and embarrassment. His father, Anthony Falcone, appeared at his side and gripped his arm in warning, clearly recognizing that the public relations battle had been decisively lost. As the Falcones retreated and normal conversations gradually resumed, Lorenzo looked at his daughter with new eyes, not just pride, but a genuine respect that transcended their family connection. "You planned this," he said quietly. "The timing, the audience, all of it." "We did," Olivia acknowledged, her hand finding Daniel's in a gesture that needed no explanation. Lorenzo's gaze moved to their linked hands, then up to Daniel's face. What passed between the two men in that moment wasn't spoken aloud, but an understanding was reached, one that acknowledged both the personal and professional dimensions of what was developing. "Well," Lorenzo said finally, "it seems our families have more to discuss than shipping routes and territory agreements." Joseph Russo raised his champagne glass in a subtle toast. "Indeed, though I suspect these young people have already negotiated terms more binding than anything we could arrange." As the evening continued around them, Olivia stood tall beside the man who had never seen her as too plain, whose eyes had recognized from the beginning what Gabriel Falcone had been too shallow to perceive. In his gaze, and now in the respectful attention of everyone in the room, she found not validation for her appearance, but acknowledgement of her true self, fierce, intelligent, and finally, completely visible. Spring came early to Chicago that year, as if nature itself was eager to wash away the harsh winter that had reshaped the city's underworld landscape. Cherry blossoms appeared in Lincoln Park, while patches of snow still lingered in shaded corners, their delicate pink contrasting with the last remnants of ice, beauty emerging from coldness, much like Olivia's own transformation. The Donatelli Russo wedding took place in early May, not in some grand cathedral or luxurious hotel ballroom, but in the garden behind Rosa's bookshop. The elderly woman had insisted on hosting the ceremony, claiming proprietary rights as the one who had helped Olivia navigate her darkest days. The small, intimate gathering included only family members, and the closest associates from both organizations. A deliberate choice that emphasized the personal nature of the union, despite its significant business implications. Olivia wore a gown of ivory silk, elegant in its simplicity. No elaborate veil obscured her face. No excessive jewels competed for attention. Her only adornments were her mother's diamond earrings and the antique silver brooch from Daniel, symbols of a heritage honored and a future embraced. Father Malone officiated, his weathered face beaming with genuine pleasure as he guided the couple through their vows. These weren't the traditional promises of obedience and servitude, but words they had written themselves, commitments to partnership, respect, and the courage to build something new from the foundations of their shared worlds. As they exchanged rings beneath an arch of spring flowers, Lorenzo watched his daughter with complex emotions playing across his usually guarded features. Pride, certainly, but also a wistful acknowledgement that she had transcended the limitations he had unconsciously placed upon her. In seeking to protect Olivia, he had nearly prevented her from becoming the formidable woman who now stood before him, confident and radiant not because of conventional beauty, but because of the strength that radiated from within. Joseph Russo stood beside him, the two patriarchs united in witnessing a union that symbolized far more than a personal connection. The Donatelli-Russo alliance, formalized through blood and choice, rather than strategic calculation, had already begun reshaping Chicago's underworld power structure. The Falcones, weakened by Gabriel's public humiliation and the exposure of several key operations, had retreated to a diminished territory. Frank Bianchi had been forced to negotiate new terms that acknowledged the shifted balance of power. But today wasn't about business or territory or power plays. It was about two people who had found in each other something rare in their harsh world: true recognition, genuine respect, and a love built on seeing beyond surfaces to the essence beneath. At the small reception that followed, Rosa raised her glass in the first toast. The old woman's eyes twinkled with mischief and wisdom as she addressed the gathered guests. "To Olivia and Daniel," she proclaimed, her voice surprisingly strong, "and to Gabriel Falcone, whose blindness gave us this moment. May he continue to surround himself with beautiful ornaments while never understanding the true power that passes him by." Laughter rippled through the gathering, not cruel but appreciative of the irony. Daniel's arm tightened around Olivia's waist as he leaned down to whisper in her ear. "I've never seen you more beautiful than you are today." Olivia looked up at him, at the amber eyes that had always seen her clearly. "Even though I'm still the same plain woman Gabriel rejected?" Daniel's smile was warm with a certainty that needed no validation from others. "You were never plain, Olivia. You were extraordinary in ways he wasn't equipped to see. His rejection didn't change you. It simply freed you to become fully yourself, without diminishment." Later that evening, as twilight settled over the garden and guests continued celebrating around them, Olivia found a moment of solitude near the small fountain that marked the center of Rosa's carefully tended space. Reflections played across the water's surface, fragmented and beautiful in their imperfection. Lorenzo joined her there, his steps deliberately heavy enough to announce his presence. For a moment, father and daughter stood in comfortable silence, watching the water catch the last golden light of day. "Your mother would be proud," he said finally. "Not of the match, though Daniel is a good man, but of who you've become, of how you've found your own way." Olivia turned to study her father's face, the lines etched by decades in a merciless business, the weight of decisions that could never be undone. "I learned from you, Papa. You taught me to be strategic, to be patient, to see the board rather than just the pieces." "Perhaps," Lorenzo acknowledged with a slight smile. "But this?" He gestured toward the gathering, toward Daniel speaking with Joseph Russo, toward the new reality their union had created. "This vision was entirely yours. You saw possibilities where I saw only traditions and limitations." He took her hands in his, a rare gesture of affection made more significant by its public setting. "Gabriel Falcone thought he was rejecting you for being too plain," he said, his voice low but fierce with conviction. "What he failed to understand is that true beauty, the kind that reshapes worlds rather than merely decorating them, reveals itself only to those with the wisdom to recognize it." As the celebration continued around them, Olivia thought about the strange path that had led to this moment. A cruel rejection that had initially seemed like the end of her carefully constructed world had instead become the catalyst for its transformation. In losing what she had been taught to value, status as the perfect wife to a powerful man, she had discovered her own power, her own vision, her own worth, independent of others' assessment. And in Daniel's eyes, Those eyes that had seen her fierce intelligence and quiet strength from their first meeting. She had found not just love, but the rarest gift her world could offer. The freedom to be fully, completely herself, plain or extraordinary, exactly as she was. The antique silver mirror he had given her now sat on their dresser at home, not as a tool for examining flaws or conforming to others' expectations, but as a reminder that true beauty reveals itself most clearly to those who have the courage to really see, both themselves and others, beyond surface appearances to the fiercer truths beneath.